Hello, my name is Daniel Spies, and you're listening to the Evolve Podcast. Evolve is a podcast aimed to help you evolve into the person you desire to become. By diving deep, we can extract practical insights, dispel bad information, and move forward with tangible actions to better our lives.
All right, guys, welcome back to another interview portion of my channel. Today I have the very awesome Tim Marshall. He is an author and quote-unquote crash test dummy. So maybe you can explain a little bit about these titles that he's have in the next couple of minutes. But he's an award-winning author, motivational speaker, and pretty much all-around badass from what I can get from his book. A very intense cover. So without further ado, I want, you, Tim, to kind of just open up and tell us a little bit about you and, how you got to overcoming your fear.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Tim S. Marshall. It's great to finally talk to you. And my background is this. I'm originally from Michigan. I moved down to Florida when I was 12 years old, and I kind of got stuck with my first change in life. And I had all these fears, and I basically got stuck for about 8 years. So at the age of 20, I had a 7th grade education. All my buddies went off to school, and I was basically busting tables. And at that point, I realized at that point that, you know what? I better make a change or I'm going to be stuck for the rest of my life. And I found a tape in the garage, and it said The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And the words were, you become what you think about. And then from that point on, I kind of changed it into your own actions. So I went on a 20-year tear of basically doing every single thing that I could think of that I felt uncomfortable, that I feared. And I filled it in with fillers of knowledge and action. So I went from a 7th grade education to tutoring and quantitative methods. And then I went into outside sales with social phobia. I had panic attacks, anxiety. It was the last thing that I was supposed to do. My college professor said, whatever you do, don't go into outside sales. You're much too quiet. You lack presentation skills. I'm going to save you time. And then I became the #1 account manager in the world for a nationally recognized company. And then from that, I started my own company from scratch in 2008 and made Inc. magazine's list as far as one of the fastest growing companies. So along the way, I've taught, I've spoken, I've taken 20 some years of notes. And basically what I do is I take a problem, and if I feel uncomfortable about it, I solve it on my own. I do the research, I practice the action, the activity, and then I teach it to others.
Right. And I actually really like that, because part of I do kind of the only way I can relate is, a lot of my personal and private coaching is solution based. It's result based. And I feel like if you're not result based in nature, or you don't try to create yourself to be result based in nature, then it's just going to be that much harder for you to do those things.
Absolutely. And, you can look at it like I use analogies sometimes to communicate, or when I do public speaking events, and it's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. You could have this great image, but if you don't put the pieces together, which is typically one action at a time, and try to solve it and bridge it together, then what do you really have at the end of the day? So it is about solutions. And, I coach a lot of people, from professional athletes to CEOs, or anybody that feels like they're stuck in anything. And it's all the same thing. It's just the fear of change, or it's the fear of judgment.
Yeah, because it sounds like a lot of, I feel like the main problem is that people are on the verge of changing, and then they stop in their tracks. Right.
Absolutely. And
fear of the unknown.
Yeah, the fear of the unknown. And what happens is too, it's like you'll have this great idea and say, you know what, I want to be this and I want to do this. And then you start to practice it, and then it becomes so uncomfortable that you go back into your comfort zone, and then you settle. And that's actually the time when you need to hit it the hardest. So what I usually teach people on is what's called speed and activity. The more you do something over and over and over again that you feel uncomfortable with, then you become that. And then that actually, statistically, you have a less of a chance to pull back, and you just consistently move forward. But you always got to basically, have those small victories, but increase your knowledge based on problem solving and act on it.
Right. So it's almost like you're creating your own behavioral rituals, right? It almost sounds like it's NLP a little bit of neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah. Yeah. You basically, I mean, you create your own computer, basically. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. But yes, you design yourself the way you want, as long as you practice those steps and you continue with them.
That's so right. And I think people get so caught up with all these different people and these advertisements and these guys, like these big guys who are just saying, following like a certain process. You have to create your own process to like create yourself. There is no other version of you out there that you can look to, right? Like, yes, like you can have a mentor, you can look up to like you or Tony Robbins or somebody, Zig Ziglar, like whoever it may be. But at the end of the day, you need to apply those things that you learn with actions and instill it with the behavior that you want to administer for yourself. You got to become the person you want to be, I feel like.
Yeah. And you couldn't have said it better. And either if you want to start your own company or do something different, it's always good to see who succeeds. But the best is always look at somebody that worked at it from the bottom up. But when you learn that, you stay true to yourself. It's sort of like in sales. I'm like not Mr. Salesy guy, but I did incredibly well in sales because I just was true to myself and I like people. So I practiced different things, but I created my own brand.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed consistent with that. And it's sort of like what you said. And this is a big thing when I go to colleges is you see all these great images. It's like the Thanksgiving Day parade. They go by. Wow, I want to be that. 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 I want to be, the greatest idea of the month. But in reality, you got to develop your own float. And then you just stick with it 100%. You can learn from others and fill in the gap of knowledge, but you have to stay true to yourself.
Yeah, and there's something that you touched on that I really liked, and I saw it in your book. This consistency idea, not just consistency like action wise, but mindset wise, being consistent and matching up the two. Can you talk a little bit more about how consistency plays a role?
Absolutely. And I would say this, sometimes we talk about, and it's like when I brought up earlier, you become what you think about. I would say you become more what your actions are. Right. So in order to be consistent and really stay consistent, you have to have either positive or negative actions. And it's your choice to decide what they are. But in order to really create consistency, it's continuously taking those steps, which is typically uncomfortable. And then you start becoming extremely consistent. But if you think your way out of it or think your way into something else, or I'm going to do this and you don't do it, that's where that immobility sets in. And then the self-doubt, which we're supposed to have, which is completely normal. Thousands of years ago, we're supposed to have all these fears and self-doubt and judgment and all this stuff. So we're basically cracking the code by continuously acting on what's uncomfortable in order so that we can build a bridge and stay consistent with ourselves.
That's so important. And like, I'm trying to think about how like the everyday person can apply that, like the guy who's working the 9 to 5 and he's looking at Tony Robbins and he's going, or the busser who tunes into Tony Robbins or you, and he goes, I want to break my fear. And then he sees everybody around him. What can that guy do? What can like the busser of today do?
I would say this is number one, you got to start somewhere.
Just anywhere, like throw a dart, right?
Throw a dart. But the biggest thing is you start with humility.
Okay.
And humility is the number one thing that we overlook. Like when I graduated high school, somehow, some way with the 7th grade education, I had to humble myself and say, you know what? I have to take all these remedial classes. I have to learn from the very, very bottom up in order to achieve. The same with Tony Robbins. He started off somewhere. If you look at anybody that's really succeeded from the bottom, they started with humility. And that's the biggest point, because once you have that humility, you become more aware and open to making changes.
Now, do you think humility kind of curates like the goal or the purpose? Because kind of like you said, it's like the goal. Without the goal, you can't really you need the goal to know what you want to do, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like once you figure out like the drive or the part of yourself, like this is what I want to release into the world, then like that kind of sets you up for like, cool, I want to be here. and I need to do all these other things that's required of me to get to those goals. It's almost like an equation, it sounds like.
Absolutely. It's problem solving. You couldn't have said it better. It's sort of like this.
Yeah.
If I'm going to climb a mountain, if I look up at the peak all the time, they're more than likely I'm going to start complaining. So I might have a picture of that mountain, but if I take that one little step at a time, one step, even though it feels uncomfortable, the worst thing we can do sometimes is measure time and success.
Right.
As long as you're practicing good actions and you're learning and you're problem solving like a mathematical formula, you really will become anything. It's sort of like riding a bike or learning how to play golf or basketball or going to school, whatever it is. We had to start somewhere, and you start learning it. And as we get older, we forget about that. And we think that automatically it should just come, or we're not good enough, or you know what? That person is so good, I'll never be like that. And that's not true at all. I mean, literally, you can achieve anything, as long as you put your mind to it with the humility and then the practicing, those small steps.
And the limiting beliefs aspect that you just touched up on, I feel like is so important, because there's not only are there people out there that they're struggling for that humility, but they're also seeing people around them and they're telling themselves, the gap is so wide. But that's what all goals are, right? If you don't have a wide enough gap, then like it's not a good enough goal, right? And I feel like there's just so many people who are telling themselves, I can't do that. Like, I'm so far away. How do I get closer?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's sort of like this, and gap is a good word. And I always tell people based on the fear of the unknown. If you're going to start something new, you start to learn whatever that is, and then you start filling in the gaps. And the more gaps you fill in, the more confident you become. So that's where it's important to start at humility. Sometimes hitting your bottom is the very best place to begin, because you have an open mind and awareness. And then you have, just like you said, this giant gap. And you might look at somebody and say, there's no way I'll achieve that. But once you start adding in those little fillers, one step at a time with knowledge and practice, anybody will be shocked at how far they get. But the key is you gotta remain open and aware and do what you fear.
And so I guess to sum up that point, it's just the more you do, the more you're going to be able to see for yourself, right? How far you will really come. Because I feel like a lot of people don't look back and see. There's so many people that look at what they don't accomplish, and they don't really, and they really need to do that more. They just kind of look forward and see what they haven't completed, versus giving themselves that validation to say, this is how far I've come, and I already have a mountain that I've climbed on already, even though it's not the pinnacle. I still have a view to look down on. And I feel like, a lot of people need to appreciate that. And maybe appreciation is also another element of this.
Yeah, I agree big time. And it's life is filled with moments that change all the time. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And sometimes I communicate with people based on 3 chalkboards. You have a chalkboard of what you thought about yesterday, what you feared, or whatever the problems were. And the second chalkboard is, who do you want to be today? And that's problem solving and living in the moment. And then tomorrow is, what does that image look like? But you got to be careful with tomorrow, because, that image has to be something you can excel in and not project in a negative way. So I always tell people, if you look at the first chalkboard, and if you have self-doubts and fears, maybe it's from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, put a date next to it, because it's spoiled. If it was milk, would you drink it? You wouldn't. It's gone. It doesn't exist. So staying in the day is really problem solving on what you want to try to achieve today, and what does that image look like, but stay on track. And we're all going to get caught off with, zingers and all kinds of things that throw us off. But the bottom line is, if we stay with problem solving and learn something new and act on it every single day, yes, you will live in the moment for sure.
And it's almost like you're touching upon this whole macro versus micro. When I think about doing the day-to-days and kind of really taking those steps, how would you become more involved on the micro than focusing on the bigger picture? And then where's the balance between the two?
For me, it's like this, as I, for example, when I went into sales, I started to really kind of problem solve, and I did what was uncomfortable. I took on rejection head on. And then I took a problem and said, you know what? That did not work when I called that person, or that did not work the way I introduced, or maybe it was the way I presented. So then I kind of take it into a micro position where I say, you know what? If I try this a little bit different and try this, let's see what the percentages are after I do it. So I basically micronize it every single day, where I look at something and I problem solve it. The same way with writing books. I took 20 some years of notes and I was criticized. Hey, you know what? You gave way too many secrets away, because I wanted to give takeaways. Those takeaways are from problem solving on a micro level of just problem solve. This saves me time and other people time when I teach, so they don't have to go through all those steps. But that's how you do it, is you have to be self-aware, but you also have to engage other people and ask them what their perceptions are of you problem solving as well. Because sometimes we get caught up and think that, you know what, we're not doing well, or maybe we are doing well. But if you have people that you really trust that are succeeding, then it's a great point in order to build a little team together that you can problem solve in a micro level approach daily.
And so it's like feedback looping pretty much.
Absolutely. And it's collaboration. In today's society, there's so much technology, and it's amazing when I get into a room to speak with people. It's like somebody could save themselves 10 years just by asking the person next to them one question. And then you just keep going around. And if you see people that are succeeding, find out what are they doing? How are they doing it? And if people are struggling, it's the same thing. You kind of just say, you know what? I don't really want to do that. That'll save me time. So really, it's like a thesaurus. You can really become your own, dictionary just by asking, communicating, collaborating. 100%.
Do you think people are making it too complicated?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my biggest thing is 100. I've run technology companies. I don't know anything about technology.
Yeah.
I know about building relationships and networking. I like people. I want to help them. But I mean, I have people that love technology and they'll problem solve all day long. And there's some of it, yes, I need to know the very basics and be very good at it. But if I get too complicated, then that doesn't work for me. Other people like that. They like the intricacies of technology. So you create an environment around you that complements sometimes your strengths and your weaknesses.
Right.
So keep it simple is the most important thing. And if we overthink it, then all of a sudden that problem becomes bigger, and then we don't really act on it. So it's like just keeping it very basic, simple, building relationships with strangers, learning from other people.
And just learning and growing from outside yourself, because you don't have all the answers sometimes. So there's going to be a lot of data that's not going to be in your mind, something that's seen outside of you, I guess.
Yeah.
I've always made it a habit to kind of like ask people particular questions, when I first meet them, like, oh, how do I come off to you? Like, blah, blah, blah. I like asking, I like engaging.
Excellent. Yes. I mean, when I speak, sometimes I'm like, was I good? Was I bad? What can I improve on? It's because I don't know, I want to make sure I get better by problem solving. That's on a micro level. Same way with engaging, whether it's a CEO or somebody else. It's just, you really want to create an awareness, and that's where humility comes in as well. Sometimes the saddest thing is I'll do a seminar and then I'll have people ask me questions afterwards that they really should have asked me before, which is fine, but they had fear of being judged by their question. And meanwhile, it's like, maybe I'm running out or whatever it is. But the biggest thing is that, we're all human. We're all sensitive. We all have the same abilities to achieve most anything as long as we put our minds to it. And in today's technology and world, there's no such thing as a right or wrong answer. There's no such thing as the expert. We're just kind of creating and evolving. And if we stay consistent with that, we could be an expert in one day or not the next day.
Yeah, it's really a matter of how qualitative you want to be and what you want and what is needed to be done to get there, I guess. And it's so easy to kind of dilute your goals with overcomplication and not taking responsibility of your decisions and your actions. I feel like where a lot of people, it's just too much work. And what I find out a lot in my coaching, some like a lot of the majority of the consults I have personally, I don't work with people because they're not willing to do the work. It's all about participation, because it's them, it's the client, or it's whoever I'm talking to. I've actually like made it like my own ritual to call people's bluffs on accountability.
Yep, absolutely. And being accountable is very important. And my two favorite words are open mind and drive. When you have an open mind, you have the ability to make and want changes for the better. And when you have drive, you want to go ahead and put the actions towards them. So if somebody doesn't want it, they think they want to change, but meanwhile, they're blaming whatever it is in 5,000 different ways, or saying, you know what, I got raised a certain way, or I'm stuck in this job, or whatever. It's all blame. Well, forget all that. Forget, it doesn't exist. It's just a perception. So I agree 100%. Once you're like, okay, you really want to learn and you really want to practice what you learn, that's when you're off to the races. So I couldn't agree more.
And I think it's kind of funny too. It's almost ironic because people get vortexed into like this fear area, this place, and then they see other people not in fear, and it makes them curious, right? And then there's the curiosity factor where it's like, wait a minute, I don't have to live in fear. Like, how do I get out? And so I honestly believe that curiosity drives intelligence without a doubt, because if there's no curiosity to be in a better place or to want something, then there's no transformation.
Absolutely. And if you look at it from like a 2 or 3 year old, right?
Yeah.
They're curious. They want to learn this. They want that. They're going to do this. They're going to outsell everybody. Totally. So it's like, as we get older, we kind of get stuck in this, okay, we kind of just have to stay in this little zone. But in order to become fearless, you have to practice on what you fear. And then it's amazing as time goes on, even with public speaking. I had a phobia of speaking in front of other people. Now I'm like, I'll speak in front of thousands, but it took a step. It's not like, okay, I just got up one day and I'm just this and I'm that. And, oh, wow, it just happened automatically. It was just a continuous action. And then all of a sudden it's like the freedom is amazing. Once you really start practicing and doing what you fear and practice something that you think about the most, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And then it's like you want to learn more, just like you were saying right now. It's like, gosh, just reach for different things and learn them.
That's how I was like a couple years ago when I was 21. I had this thing in my head that told me, you're horrible with finance and knowing like about investments and stuff. And then one day I literally was just like, you know what? I'm just going to teach myself everything there is to know about finance. And now I do trading, and so it's crazy how like once you like just attack your fears, or not even just attack them, but just start being aware of what's in your closet, be aware of what demons are lurking around, be friends with them, be cool with them, because eventually you're just going to sidestep them outside of your house, and then you'll be rid of them, I feel like. And
absolutely. Yeah.
It's crazy how many people just, they're just so close. They're so close to just a shift differently to how they would pursue the world. And it's just one shift.
Yep. And you know what it is too? It's like what you said, and this is the greatest thing of, where it's so important. And you nailed it. You felt like that, you didn't know about finances and, whatever those problems and solutions were, and then you learned it.
Yeah.
And then you realize, what? This wasn't so hard, or this isn't so hard. So it's like we give these massive things so much energy that don't exist. And once you start learning about them, you're like, geez, I can do that too, pretty easy. And you know what? that guy's not as smart as I thought he was. I'm just as smart. Researching something and learning something, that's the greatest gift you can give yourself. That's awesome.
Yeah, and something that I've come to realize recently this year is it's about valuing that stuff. It's not just about the curiosity, but it's about I actually value whatever it is, and that gives you the motivation because you like it. If you value something, you're going to do it easier than something that you don't value, right?
Yes, and I would say sometimes too we might not value something, whereas like, I had a fear of public speaking or even writing or doing certain things in my life, and I never realized that I would love them. I never knew how much I would love certain things that I thought there's no way I'm going to like that. Or starting my own company from scratch and having all these employees and overhead and all these different things, public speaking. But it was all these things that I thought that, what, I don't like any of that stuff. I want to be comfortable. I want to watch a football game. But that was the opposite. When I learned something that I thought I was not going to be good at, that become very, very much valued. And then I teach it to other people. And then you start building value in other people. And that's where you become, that problem to a solution for other people.
I actually just thought of something really interesting. It almost sounds like empowerment can only be obtained when you pursue something that you either feared or you had a limiting belief on, and then you relinquished those negative things. But that mindset of seeing the comparison of, oh, wow, like I had this, but now I passed it. I think that's where empowerment comes from. It comes from the motivation of doing it, like the actual experience of overcoming it.
It's freedom.
Yeah.
When you learn something that you thought that, you weren't going to be good at, or if you achieve something that you thought you would never do, and then all of a sudden you problem solve it and you stick with it though. And that's the key. It's a journey. We've heard this over and over again. Practice is a lifetime. There's no graduation. Some people graduate school and they're like, okay, well, that's the last book I'll ever read. No, keep going, learn new stuff, because that really is fulfilling. That builds freedom, confidence. And then the next thing you know, you're building wealth.
Yeah.
Because it's like a circle. It all comes together.
And talking about that idea of building, like making that transition to wealth, it's kind of funny because like I look at my life personally, and when I think about it, every decision that I make, it either like you can kind of project, like you don't have to have like a crazy intuition. I just happen to, but on a basic level, you can literally say to yourself, if I do X decision over Y decision, that's going to lead to a positive outcome. And maybe Y will lead, maybe X will lead to like some positive outcome, but more negative. Y will lead to more negative, more positive, but you can project those things, and people don't take time. They really don't take the time to think about it. They kind of just see like the short-term gains, and then they find themselves in decisions that they've made that are not as compelling as they thought it was. And when I look at my life, it's like, great. If I always think about like the 10-year rule or the 5-year rule. Is this a decision that 5 years from now is going to make me happy? Right. Even if it's as simple as going into the refrigerator and getting like getting food, you know what I mean? Like, it's about like, it's almost like an Indian perspective. Native Americans always have this idea of the philosophy of, if I litter, is that going to impact the environment, 10 years from now? And if it does, then you don't do it,
Absolutely. And if I use my, I'll use my example of, the fear of rejection of going into sales led me to selling, led me to starting a company, led me back to selling again. I already overcame the fear of rejection. So I was able to build up a customer base. Next thing you know, I built up a revenue stream. Along the way, I learned how to teach and speak and communicate, teach, delegate, and inspect. And then it just leads to something else. I took notes along the way. So it's like, it's all your actions that multiply over the long distance. And that gratifying feeling will come 100%. Mm-hmm. But if you're just looking for the lottery ticket, then more than likely you're going to be stuck. And it really does take on, looking ahead and having some long-term goals.
I have a really quick story for you if you want to listen, and it's about kind of I started in sales. I was selling phones at an AT&T, and always in top 5%, 10% of my sales team. We were working with a company called Spring Mobile. Don't know if you've ever heard of them, or it's a mobile company.
Okay.
And I'm doing good, but the manager I had, and I quit this position. I loved it. I loved meeting my goals. I loved the selling phones. I like tech, but my manager only wanted to just do bottom line, and he would take my sales and he would make the store level out, kind of, right? And I wasn't cool with that. I'm a team player, but if people have their responsibilities. And so I had consulted a friend about what to do. And he said, Dan, I know you're really not into cars, but maybe you should step up your game, just take your sales mentality, take it somewhere else, make more money. And I'm like, well, I really don't like cars. And I'm like, I do, but I don't know how I would sell them. I went to a dealership. I ended up knowing the manager who's still good friends with me today. And he's like, I'll give you a shot because you sold me your phone. And I'm like, okay, great. And he's like, but there's a contingency. And I'm like, what's the contingency? And he said, you have 1 month to sell one car. Nobody's going to teach you anything. You got to follow, you got to learn, you got to figure it out yourself. I'll have you chaperone with the best guy that we have, and you figure it out. I ended up selling 16 cars my first month.
Good for you.
But I had this limiting belief. I'm like, how am I going to sell these cars? Like, he was literally throwing me into the fire. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. I went from like a desk sales job, where I'm just behind a counter and I'm on the floor, and it was just it was life changing. And I'm like, I'm selling products that are $20, $30, $40, $50, $80,000.
Yeah.
Like, that was empowering to me.
That's awesome. And I think, one of the biggest impacts too, what you said is that, you got your contact from selling your phone that leveraged over to selling cars.
Yeah.
So then that was one step. And because you're a good guy, people like you. So then you build relationships, and then you leveraged it, and you became very successful. And I think, I know this as far as what you said. The most important thing, and that's how I was thrown in sales too, it's like there was no brochures. It was just go out and make it happen.
Yeah.
I had to become my own business. And that's the greatest advice we can give people is, even if you're working for a company, be your own business within a business. So that in the future, if you want to branch out and start your own company, you'll already be prepared. But learning from the bottom up, which is what you just said, and that's an amazing amount of cars to sell in a month. So that's huge, so it's like that's a perfect example right there. You cracked the code. literally. So,
yeah. And so that's what I was thinking. And I'm like, it's so easy. Like, I always think, how can other people crack that code? Every time and this is like kind of my mindset when I go out, whether it's McDonald's or I go to Best Buy or whatever, when seeing people settle for their value, seeing people settle for $9 an hour or $7 or $15 or something that they know that they're worth more, but they don't know that either they're not aware that it's available, or they're not being resourceful, or they're just submitting to, their story, what's been playing in their mind, continuously, and having people break out of those cycles, Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it boils down to, what you even said earlier. It's like, if you look at somebody that's extremely successful, like Richard Branson, it's like, okay, you know what? I'll never be like him, so I'm going to stay where I'm at. Or I'll look at an owner of a company and I maybe work for that company and say, you know what? There's no way I'm going to be that either. But the key is really becoming aware of something and saying, you know what? I'm going to take this small step and I'm going to learn something new. Because a lot of people do. They settle, they get stuck, they dream in their own head, and those dreams just keep going on, but they never go anywhere. So it really does become, breaking it down. It's like my first chapter, and the power of breaking fear is all based on awareness. You have to become aware. of yourself. Ask other people. Look around you, because more than likely, if you're not happy, you're settling. And if you're settling, you're not moving, and you're not striving for something that we talked about, is doing what's uncomfortable, problem solving, and then increasing the dopamine to learn something new.
Yeah. And it's kind of like kind of in a way too, when you're not doing what you need to be doing for yourself, there's a disrespectful energy that you're giving yourself that other people see. And so it's like saying, oh, wow, that person shouldn't get a promotion because he's in this space, or, that's why he's not getting his clients, or his business isn't as good. And, all these little subtle things add up, to you, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it boils down to, how do we value ourselves?
Yeah.
If I settle, I devalue myself. If I whoosh and if I don't do anything, I devalue myself. But if I start doing what's uncomfortable and learning something new, I start to build value in myself. And then all of a sudden the confidence goes up. So it's those subtle changes, that builds the confidence.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Man, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Brainstorming here. But I definitely want to touch up on one other topic that's kind of like on a sidestep.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're getting into like almost, I think, 40 minutes here. There is something that appealed to me in your book, one of the chapters, about having so much potential, right? Or untapped. I think it's called untapped potential. It's called lost in potential, actually.
Yes.
Lost in potential. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that affected your life. Being you, like, from what you talked about, it sounds like, you've learned a lot. Whatever you needed to learn to get to your goal, you just accomplished it. And so with that comes a lot of potential, or flexibility, right? And so me and you, I feel like you're a lot like me in the sense of you're very adaptable, right? You can learn things on the fly. If you need to learn something in a crunch, somebody had to go to the hospital in your business and you need to take on that role, you have no idea what to do, you'll learn it. You'll do what's necessary. And so with people who have a lot of potential, like me personally, when I work for a business, any business, I always end up in a 360 role. I always end up working as like an administrator for every different aspect of the business somehow. And so what I would want to know, to kind of project to the viewers, is, what do people who have that lost in potential aspect do? What do they do to focus on a goal if they're lost in a lot of goals?
That's a great question. And I would say behind that is fear of change. And, when I moved down here when I was 12 and I just kind of got stuck.
Yeah.
I had fear of adapting, fear of change, social phobia. So what I did was I learned how to overcome that by taking on challenges in order to learn that. So when we get lost in potential, we often think about sometimes, what? If I make that move, I might lose what I already have, or maybe I'll be self-judged, or there's going to be all kinds of different repercussions. Mm-hmm. But what I usually try to do and communicate with people is two things. Number one is this: whatever you're doing, look around. If you're working for a company, look how it's, being run. If you're in a family, look how the communication is. And the other thing is learn something new that parallels with your overall want to achieve something in the future. If I feel stuck in a certain job and maybe I can't make a move right now financially, I'm going to learn something on the side over a period of time. So much confidence that when I'm ready to make a move, just sort of like starting a new company from scratch, I never borrowed any money because I learned everything I could over a period of time. And I didn't have that fear. Did I have fear of change? Yes. But did I overcome it by filling up the solution bucket? Absolutely. But that takes time. So when somebody is lost in potential, learn act on what you learn and move forward with what you learn, because that's how you reach your potential. You know, one of the guys that I'm good friends with plays for the New Orleans Saints, and I talked to him over the summer. He had half of his intestines removed, if not all of them. He lost like 50 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And he was supposed to be like a first or second round pick years ago, and he played for Penn State. And he's like, Tim, it's only one way. You know, you go off the shore, you burn the ship, and there's no way back. So he just got picked up by the Saints, and now he's running down the field. And I said to him the other day, I'm like, dude, great story. What it takes in 0 to 8 seconds, because he's on special teams, and last year he was the captain of special teams. But my point is this: we can overcome anything. Most anything. You know, obviously, if we're 60 years old and we're trying to play in the NFL, that's a different story. You know, here's a good story where it's like, you know what? The odds were against this guy. I mean, big time, 100%. There's no way he should have put on a uniform. Guess what?
He did it.
Pads. You know, he broke through. And that's what the greatest thing about living in your own potential is, saying, you know what? This might feel too easy, or I'm settling. Let me try something that's ridiculously hard, but practice learning it first and filling in the gaps so that when you do jump, you're prepared.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. And I guess it's kind of like, if you want your success, you can have it. It's there waiting for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think more people should have that idea. It's like, it's there. It's in your future. It's just waiting for you to get to that point.
Yeah. And it's patience, and a lot of it too, you know, some of the things too, it's like what you said when you went from, you know, selling the phones and then selling 16 cars in 1 month. You know, there's an uncomfortability, I'm sure, but you built up resiliency.
Yeah.
You know, you learned finances. You built up resiliency. When you coach people now, because you've done certain things to make changes, so you can say, hey, it can be done.
Yeah.
I've done it. The more we do, the more resilient we become, and then the more fearless we become.
Yeah.
And then we start the process.
And it's cool too, because the only gift that I would love to give to other people is the gift of being stoic and unmoving to just everyday challenges. Like, you know, I get into a car accident. Okay, do what needs to be done, move on, right? Okay, I didn't meet my goals, make new goals, do more, right? You don't get caught up in the not just the challenge, but the mind games that are welcome to when you don't meet either your own expectations or outside experiences. You take what is right there in the present moment, and you take actions to create a solution for that.
Absolutely. And yeah, I would say 100%, you know, expect the unexpected every single day. You know, it's funny. Sometimes I'll be at a restaurant, somebody might spill a glass of water on me. It doesn't even faze me, you know, because it's like, there's always going to be something from the outside. There's going to be noise. There's going to be texts. There's going to be this. There's going to be that. Somebody's not happy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, but the quality of my time is not measurable. I mean, it's literally like, you know, we're all different. We're all uniquely different. We have one life to live, and it's like, make the very best out of it. If we get caught up in somebody else's world, it's not about us.
Yeah.
It's our job to stay focused, and how much meaning we give a certain thing that happens in our day is up to us. Either a negative meaning or a positive one.
Yeah. And kind of like what you touched on, like just how you react, you know, reacting is everything. You know, you live one life, choose how you react, because then that starts to become a part of who you are.
Absolutely. And it's like, if something happens today where, you know, somebody makes me really upset, and then all of a sudden it's their fault and I'm blaming them, and then all of a sudden I lose all my energy. I just gave away all my power.
Yeah.
So I've learned over time, I keep my power 100%. You know, some things bother me, of course, but for the most part, man, I keep my batteries on and my flashlight bright. You know, and that's by not allowing other people to affect me, but that's also surrounding myself with good people. It's a big thing, you know, or if we start to surround ourselves with toxic people, more than likely we're going to become toxic.
Law of averages, Tim. Law of averages.
Totally. Absolutely.
Surround yourself with good people and a good place that you thrive in. That's all you need. And then it's all on you. I definitely have to touch base with you again on all these topics. I know we're gonna go into a little much. I want to make sure that viewers don't get turned off by how long this video is gonna be, Tim. So if you can summarize kind of any thoughts that you have for anybody watching this, and if this was like your moment to kind of have like a one-on-one with them to bring them forward, what would you tell them?
I would say, you know what, no matter where you are in life, no matter where, there's no right or wrong time. There never is. So if you want to make a change, it doesn't even take time. Just make the change. And then what you want to do is just look at what you want to become. And sometimes what you want to become is the scariest thing that there is, because you don't know what's on the other end of it. But if you research it like a science project and you practice what you research, you can become whatever you want. And it's overcoming that uncomfortable feeling. And when you feel uncomfortable, that's not a bad sign. Obviously, there's certain things that we need to fear. But if it's positive fear, keep moving forward, because that's your greatest time to absolutely 100% achieve anything.
And that is how you break the power of breaking the fear. That's how you break the fear. Power of breaking fear.
Great. That was fun, man.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this talk, man. I hope we can do a lot more in the future. You're really awesome. And off topic, there's just a lot I would love to catch up with you on if you have the time. And I really do appreciate the time that you're giving me today. And everybody.
Absolutely. You're a good dude, man. You remind me of all the different things I do as well. So yeah, for sure.
Listen, collaboration, I'm totally open to it.
Yeah. It's funny. Yesterday I got a call. I'm speaking in front of like 3,000 people in a week. And I'm like, you just never know how big your network gets. And then next thing you know, you get picked up here, but collaboration and networking. But you're a good guy, man. So yeah, definitely. Let's keep in touch.
Sounds good. I'll fill Jennifer in, and definitely thank you for the book. I'm like halfway through. I gotta finish it, but it was really nice having you on my channel. I hope to have you back.
Yeah, for sure, man. And take care and have a great day.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys. I'm going to end the call and tune in next time.
Thanks. All right, bye.